more specifically, surrounding the university are the areas with names Bronzeville, and I've lived in Bronzeville most of my adult life as I've been here on the faculty for many decades. Bronzeville, and I've been involved in civic associations, advising the alderman. Tony Preckwinkle, as alderman, was the person who really got me involved in this, and she's now president of the county. Woodlawn, South Shore, Inglewood are national leaders of African American culture through the 20th century, with figures from Louis Armstrong, jazz, blues, gospel, later hip hop, rap, house, gangster rap, and more. Teenage gang members nearby make videos they post on YouTube, and many nationally successful singers, musicians, artists, and dancers have come from especially Bronzeville, but Bronzeville has two meanings, sort of a smaller geographic area and then a sort of general black South Side. People have gone to high schools which have now, they've come back, they go to Hollywood, they've done things fantastically, such as Jennifer Hudson, who was star of the film Dreamgirls, who would come back to her high school and talk about how you do this. Many university students and faculty try to help the less advantaged students, but are not sure what to do and how to do so specifically. What do you say with a kid who may be in lower income, but what do they know how to do better than you already? And if you're supposed to teach them, you can help them on the multiplication table. But when you get to subtle things like art and music and culture, they can teach you some stuff. I learn from every student I teach with now. If you can keep learning to learn new things is the most important thing. As we live through life, we still need some more of these guys. I've got a whole box of these too. Okay. In the fields that are taught at the university, huge changes are going on. The economists started this decade most visibly with Gary Becker when he came here after he did his own PhD. With his own PhD, it was called human capital. That is not studying money, but human capital is what's in people's heads, sometimes measured by education, but then look at talent and how does talent use money better, and that leads to computers, to AI, to new aesthetic experiences of all kinds.
If I could, just for a second.
Go ahead.
If anybody else needs a mask, just going to pass those around again.
Over there, the people on the wall there.
People who don't have a mask.
The Bob Fogel's book was called Time on the Cross, which was about slavery. How much did slavery change the lifestyle and the uses of time by African Americans in the South, and then how does that continue in the culture of African Americans in the U.S.? George Tully also worked in the South and then here, seriously modeling data from an economic standpoint on what they called amenities. And amenities are non-market goods and services, things that you don't buy, but you get them in free schools, police protection, fear of crime, clean air, and of course, the aesthetics surrounding us. In political science and in history, Neil Harris here is a top historian, studied museums, architecture, and more, as did his student, David Brooks, who's now an editorial writer for the New York Times, as did Susan Sontag, who was, these are all USC undergraduates who went on, and Susan Sontag was the New York Times film critic for years. She coined the concept and term camp and campiness. Who knows what camp is? Anybody knows? Nobody. Okay. We'll talk about camp, but that This is an aesthetic. That is, this comes from the literature and the humanities. We want to join that sensitivity to aesthetics with economics, with political science, and because we're doing this because people in these disciplines now realize this is happening in interpenetrating ways. And this is happening in neighborhoods and streets. No longer do they have just a Polish versus a Jewish neighborhood. We have neighborhoods which may be defined by lesbian lifestyle, feminists, black culture. Well, I'm saying, let me leave out the more primordial, and let's stress things which are chosen by people maybe in the last 6 months, or they're trying things out. This is happening in neighborhoods around the world today, including China. So having the Logan Center, where people are starting a new group, we'll try stand-up comedy, we'll try painting, we'll try putting these together. This is what we're dealing with in this course, and what makes us exciting, because it's challenging, it's messy, hard to make sense, but we're doing so. That is, we're up to the state of the art. I'll put it that way. One thing that we started about 15 years ago is to take the economists' work on what they call amenities, as I mentioned, which they've tended to focus on. Let's estimate what they call an elasticity, which says if we have more cinemas, how much more money does that add, or how much does that increase the value of land or of rent in a neighborhood? What is the multiplier effect, as another economic classic way of measuring these kinds of things? These are fine, but the problem is they assume that you can assume, widely used as a term you hear in economics courses and writings, you assume everything else is equal. How can you do that empirically? You can try to build a big equation with lots of data, but often they don't have enough data, and the results become, well, let's say, inconsistent. Working with these economists and talking about these things, I can say, how can we do this better? What we did better was instead of throwing out everything, we're trying to have controls and measuring just the number of cinemas, or the number of art galleries, the number of people who are tutoring in a particular neighborhood. We said, let's put all those together. Let's use hundreds, maybe, well, millions of data bits, but to measure and put these together in different combinations of what we then call 15 scenes dimensions. So the scenes include localism, neighborliness, theatricality, transgression. These kinds of things we measure with data from blocks or zip codes for 30,000 US zip codes, and for similar things in Korea, Japan, China, Spain, France, and Poland, Canada. So, and we've been doing this for about 14, 15 years, and published mostly a book called Scenescapes, but other things, that's more US and Canada, and the other book is called copy this, I'll waive this for you. Just to see, I like the cover of this one. Kentuckville Karaoke. Okay, that's the title, that's the theme, and that's Tuckville learning to use a microphone in the 19th century. Pretty good job, but he can now karaoke by reading this book. Okay, but this challenges the main analysis of the basic workings of political science and economics in as taught in most of these traditional disciplinary perspectives, which is Tocqueville explains America. Take this to China, Japan, and Korea, and it fails. What's wrong? I was there. We had a meeting with the mayor of Seoul. Half the population of Korea all lives there. The mayor is a very important person. And I was there with Richard Florida, who's written about some of these things. And Florida said, they don't get it. I said, now wait a minute. They're doing things fantastically well here. I mean, they're building up their economies much faster than the rest of the world. They've got something right here. We got to stay here and figure them out. So I stayed for 10 years working with Korean, Chinese, Japanese and these are the co-authors of where and why these things, why does Tocqueville fail in Asia, or how can we teach Tocqueville to use the arts, and where are the arts used, and karaoke as a classic example. So how does that work within traditional, not that traditional, it's only about 30, 40 years old, but it's changing, and how does it connect to other things? Okay. If you have your computer handy, is it easy for you to show a couple of pictures of Theaster Gates? You can just search for Theaster Gates, maybe even on what's it called? TED Talk.
Yeah.
His later TED Talks, they got some pictures of him and
You don't get a lot of pictures of him, but
keep looking and he's there. I can.
There's the Astor.
We can't put it on the screen?
We can. I don't think I have the adapter.
Okay, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Remember that was on your list?
Oh, okay.
Remember
I'll bring
that?
it next time.
Okay. Okay. You've got lots of things. Look on your machines for Theaster Gates, and also on our syllabus of this course. Yeah, that's got measured right there. Look on the syllabus after the first week after Scenescapes. There's a section on Theaster Gates, and there are about four or five different websites. That is, he publishes terrific websites, and he gives you irony. He gives you teasing combinations of crime. He sings with the black, what he calls the black monks of Mississippi. And when he performs with them in the Netherlands, they're all white, but they still call them the black monks of Mississippi. He counsels high school kids the way you do. He restores buildings with unusual design ideas like recycled mirrors, wooden fences, and painted sections of farmhouses from old locations in Illinois. Part of his charisma comes from the striking combination of designs and aesthetic traditions seldom previously joined. He leads forums and art bank, art housing, and then we realized he's doing the same thing we're writing about in ScenesUofC. And some of his staff said, hey, let's try to put this together. So we had 4 people who did master's theses that worked on some aspect of these things that Theaster was doing. Whereas he was being hit in questions by his big funders saying, how can we scale up? You're doing this in a couple of neighborhoods in Chicago. How can we scale up and do this all of Chicago? Can we do this in Detroit? Can we do this in Cleveland? And he said, well, I'm not sure. So we worked together, and this is now, he then took it to Italy. He won a prize as the most important, creative, innovative artist in the world. And we're working with his ideas and as well with what the Chinese are doing with things there. So this in turn led to the new so he didn't have a program. That is, when he was asked by, I was sitting in a meeting he had with dean of the Harris School, the Chicago City Department, what's it called, the secretary, the leader of the Department of Cultural Affairs at the City of Chicago, and the lead foundation that was funding him, and they all asked the same question: what's your program? He didn't have anything to say. So we worked with these students, and his program we developed was an extension, because we had lots of words, and we put them together, and we adapted what he was trying, what he was doing, but he didn't have labels or putting it together. He couldn't explain it to anybody else. How to generalize, how to take it beyond the neighborhood we're doing it. So it's bottom up instead of top down. It can include starchitecture and DIY, do-it-yourself placemaking by individuals, huge icons, dramatic statements that leave the viewer in awe and inspire respect. The Chinese do this very well. And with the Olympics in Beijing 10 years or so ago, they left. I mean, they transformed downtown Beijing to make this so dramatic. These kinds of things, ways that you can do this on a small scale with no money. No money. He started with loans from his mother and his sister to buy a boarded up house for about $10,000. And he built it up by his own hands. He cleaned it up, and he painted it, and he put together, and then built from there. Okay, so we simultaneously, before we worked in the last 10 years or 10, 15 years on scenes, I led a program called Fiscal Austerity and Urban Innovation. And where and how cities can innovate, and it ended up with 35 countries, over 10,000 cities. So I was working with people all around the world, and so we said, hey, people like Theaster Gates, these are really important. Let's try to understand this with the approaches we're doing this, and as the idea. And we had real audiences, people from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, people from the French Mayors Association. They were really eager to learn from us, finding these things, but we learned from them. So we have meetings with, say, 15 mayors, and then say, what are the things that are really creative, and how you measure some performance budgeting in ways that you can add the arts. And so the mayor of Palo Alto will pull out of his briefcase and say, we have this is the number of people who are taking courses on painting in different age categories in different parks within Palo Alto. So a mayor from Yonkers, New York says, how can I get a book like this? Okay, so mayors learn from each other, and we learn from the mayors, and then we combine some of the analyses and the systematization, which may come more from accounting, from government services, and the like, with these aesthetic things which they've done in Palo Alto before. But then you go back to Bronzeville, hey, they're doing this before Palo Alto. This is what they listen to in Palo Alto. They make the music in Bronzeville. Hey, all right. So these things, each can learn from each other and contribute to a better understanding and aesthetic appreciation. Okay. So these are what we're doing, and this is what we're going to talk about in the course. And I could go on about some of these things, but let me even stop for a bit for a little bit of discussion. That is, I'm betting. Tell us someone who's doing something a little bit different than that are bringing you to this course. Why are you here? So let's take a couple of people who want to mention something. What you'd like to learn here. We'll also say we have a rule. If you have a cough, more than 2 or 3 coughs, we're going to ask if you could please view the rest from home. Yes.
Believe it?
You're coughing too many times. Could you please view it we're going to post this, and you can see it tonight or tomorrow. But please don't cough in the class. Yeah, yes, you. I'm being polite, but I'm setting an example in the first class. If you cough, please don't come to class.
Sorry.
No problem. No, you didn't hear it before. So okay. I never caught COVID. I'm not wearing a mask now, but as you see, I'm the state champion in bicycle racing. I want to keep I ride my bike all the way through COVID, all the way through the disturbances downtown. But you got to do things carefully to keep your health. All of you do. And as you get older, the older you get, the more important exercise does, and the better you'll feel, and you'll feel enthused. Okay. Okay, more things I can add. But let's listen to a couple of you. You with the blue shirt there. Why are you here in the class? What brought you here? Good time of the day or only?
Yeah, no, I guess I'm kind of interested in like real estate and seeing urban development, so that's part of the reason I took this class.
That's perfect. Now tell us more. Why do you care about real estate? Or what might you do with it?
Well, I mean, it's a part of everything, like any business that there is, like whether that be like finance or like retail, like everything needs real estate and property, so I'm interested to see how that can develop.
Yesterday, Gates, we had a session with our international group of people in a meeting, and he put on like some of his TED Talks. He'd have boxes and arrows, and you could do it if you want. You could have equations. This is how the way normal quote real estate decisions are being made. Then he brought out a red pen and said, "Cool capitalist." He didn't say me, but he said, this is how we change these things. And this is how we're not going to drive out those people who are lower in income. We can keep the people who have black faces and who may be lower in income. But we don't have to subsidize, we can use the market creatively. And so in that sense, he's cool, but he's a capitalist. And so he's using his own hands because he didn't have any money to begin with. But he's making a huge impact. So any more you mentioned either a job you've had or hope to have?
I mean, I worked with real estate last summer, but it was more so with loans rather than actual property. But yeah, I don't know exactly what I want to go into.
No, I had a student like you. She's from LA. She worked for a 40-hour a week job with a national consulting firm that sold data on where to make loans for real estate. So she learned the state of the art of how they were doing it. Then she was doing her own BA and adding the arts and culture, which we're doing. And she came up with several very dramatic. She then went on. She got a master's degree at Cambridge University in England, and she's working on a PhD now. So that is, these kinds of questions are central for real estate, just as they are for art dealers and for theaster gates. Let's take someone else who has another interest. What's yours?
It's more broad, but I wanted to delve into like specific functions of a place.
Would you pull your mask down? We can hear it better.
Like delve into the functions of a certain place. I know we mentioned coffee shops earlier, just like the roles that they play in a city as it evolves. And like I know cinemas.
But
like
pull your mask.
old. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't want to. Like old style cinemas, we still see them around very like advanced cities. So I was interested in how they still play like a cultural role.
Perfect, perfect. No, that is preserving, I mean, that his term ethical redevelopment is taking an old rundown factory and making it into a dramatically reshaped, repainted aesthetic on it, and maybe on its facade or something like that. And artists are doing this all around the world. One of the most dramatic in leading the U.S. in this regard is Detroit. There are I wouldn't say millions, there are hundreds of thousands of artists who've come from Germany, from Argentina. They go to Detroit because they can buy houses dirt cheap, and they can paint them with, you know, rainbows on the front of their houses if they want to, which you can't do in Chicago or most other places because of zoning, etc. So the aesthetics of how to do this and what is elegant or what is shocking, or that is which things combine that is and what and how can we measure this, say, as a multiplier effect for real estate, but how can we say aesthetically what should you have next to this kind of cafe? So I published one paper with Hee-Song Jong. She's on the screen, but you'll see more of her later on. We had 3 cafes, one in Bronzeville, one in the Loop, and one in Wicker Park. And each is very, very different. They have a different kind of neighborhood culture right next to, in which it appeals to. And in Wicker Park, they'd have feminist themes. They'd have aesthetics of green, this and that, improving the environment. In the Bronzeville area, it was more about neighborhoods and black power kinds of issues. In the Loop, people were going shopping. They were going to the Art Institute. There were tourists from around the world, etc. 3 drastically different cafe cultures. So we don't have. So cafes would be a terrific idea, something themed to do a paper on. It could be a 20-page paper. It could be something you could just do as a little project on your own. Look at stuff. Look at websites. Go to cafes yourself, and then think about and read what Yelp said. What do Yelp reviews say about one cafe, and then go to another cafe. How good or how bad are the Yelp data? What could you do that's better? That could be capture more about the aesthetics of a place. How can we recognize women, blacks, lesbians, human rights, environmentalists? These are on the front pages. How can we make this into something which is at an intellectual level that you're not laughed at by the intellectual low level of that is, the USC can do this right. You can do this right. But you can be a leader and going beyond the way that the labels say. For instance, lesbians do this. There's a new paper in the American Journal of Sociology. I think it's on the course we're reading this. And she shows in 4 different cities, from Portland, Maine, to Ithaca, New York, to part of Chicago, I think, and then in California Beach. In one, lesbians dress in business suits, and they haven't come out. They act as if they don't act any different from men or heterosexual groups or whatever. Whereas with the California Beach, the women all dress in bikinis on the beach, and they're flirting with each other. Okay, drastically different lesbian cultures, and the people. And she then interviewed them and found that they transformed their lifestyle, at least showing about it, after they got to these places. Powerful place effect on people, how they act and live, including things that are pretty intimate and dressing or undressing, etc. Okay, so what she did was to say, these things are not imposed on you. Lesbians don't have one way to do things, just as women. What percentage of American white women voted for Donald Trump? Who knows that? What percent of American white women voted for Donald Trump in his first election? About 55%. They did not vote for Hillary Clinton. Most women did not. Most people, so that came from a student paper. I learned from this from the students digging stuff out like this. Okay. So the, who else gives us, or any comments or reaction of what I've said to your thinking in this area?
I do think the coffee shop is very interesting. Like the
Hold there just a minute.
overall concept of coffee shops, especially across Chicago, as we see it like Lakeside, they're a lot more prestigious. Like we see coffee prices as well that fit a neighborhood are very different from any cafe. So
Absolutely, yes. I'd say coffee is a terrific, because in some areas, I mean, many areas, well, the U.S. had no coffee shops 30 years ago, 40 years ago. That there were tiny, I mean, that there were what was called a cafe in the frontier in 1890 was really a restaurant, or sort of a diner type place. They used that word, but it was really in the 1960s and 70s that cafes began, and that was Starbucks. So Starbucks blasted this across the U.S. And if that happened there, Starbucks then went to Asia, and they worked with Samsung in Korea, and they worked with a big organization in China, and working top down, they created a lot of Starbucks in Asia. And today in Seoul, there are more cafes than in any other city in the world, but they are less than 5% of all the Seoul cafes. They're independent. So Starbucks started. 95% are Koreans who've done it in distinctive ways. They can pat sheep. They have cats. They have music in some places it's blasting loud. Others that are quiet for studying and for writing. Others are for painting and so forth. So there's an explosion of all kinds of cafes. In most of all in Seoul, but you find it also in Shanghai, so we have collaborators. We're trying to capture the aesthetics of where and why these vary from place to place. So the people who want to pat the sheep are not the same people who want loud house music, whereas the people who want to study. But we know that, but we're trying to go beyond that and try to say, what else can we do? So we started with these three cafes in Chicago. Anybody? So what you're putting it, is it a good question? Absolutely. Do we have all the answers? Absolutely not. So we need your help, and most of the people who. One guy did a PhD, and he interviewed retail owners and managers, especially in three different neighborhoods in Chicago. And so Wicker Park, following the simple economic rent level analysis, is correct in the sense that it assumed the artist created the bohemian style. But 5 years later, they were priced out. They couldn't, because so many other people thought this was terrific. The artists were driven out. And bohemianism, that is, there were stockbrokers, there were lawyers, there were accountants who worked in the Loop, but they wanted to live in a place that was different from Lincoln Park or Hyde Park. So then, what can you do, or what preserves it? And the answer was the retail shops. They kept the look of the place, and once a month they have different shops which open in the normal shops, and they have art dealers and artists who come once, I think it's every Saturday night, once a month. And so that preserves the Wicker Park bohemian style, even though the prices would not tell you that, and the geographic proximity of others nearby, of other neighborhoods would not tell you that necessarily. So looking at different, we can call these dynamics. The dynamics in this case could be the shop owner, the manager, or it could be the artist. And the artist can say, and often there's but there are a number of entrepreneurial artists such as Theaster Gates for African American ways of doing this. Okay, and he, for instance, he'll have a black cinema. He'll have a he has the recordings of he has a guy DJ playing music from different periods, different types of music, from many things that they can feature, and then people can have discussions about these or a lecture about these kinds of things as well. Okay, so these are good examples. Let me push on a bit. Well, let me see. Let me think now. But what we want to do is normally go for about. It's a long class, so we want to stop around the middle. So if it's 3:30 till what time do we finish?
6:20. So we're probably about like 4:45 maybe, 4:50.
Okay, so we're around 4:45. Let's aim for that. We'll take a break, maybe 10-15 minutes, and then we can chat a little bit now. But then so I'm going to go a bit onto some of these other themes, and I've mentioned the other thing that's on the syllabus is Theaster Gates. So I've mentioned I've given you a good overview of Theaster Gates and the core ideas. Let me mention a couple of other big themes. Now here, this. Try to talk now, and I'll during the break I'll see if I can I can set up the PowerPoint that goes with this, but I'll just talk for a little bit now and talk about some of the big themes around what I'm discussing. Two dates to remember: 1968, 1989. These were not Marxist revolutions. They weren't economic, but they were revolutions of culture and aesthetics and lifestyle around the world. And we'll talk more about 68 and 89. We see complex confrontations among citizens, civic groups, unions, and traditional political parties. New types of groups and political leaders press for more ambitious policies like diversity, immigrant rights. The so-called new social movements, environmentalists, feminists, human rights, paved the way in the 70s, but the 21st century went much further after Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, the Occupy movements from Wall Street, went to hundreds of other cities beyond Wall Street. The fall of national leaders in Cairo, Kiev, more, with repressions in Buenos Aires and Hong Kong. These new movements of many subpopulations implemented via protests, parades, demonstrations, with puppets and poets, songs, dances, created and directed carefully for videos of mass and social media. Not by guns, not by tanks, not by killing people. A Hollywood-style, nevertheless, destruction of the World Trade Center and similar Parisian events orchestrated violence theatrically. These created new, powerful scenes. Political responses to these include new kinds of so-called populist leaders from Greece, Brazil, the Philippines, Kiev, to Mayor Ford of Toronto, and Donald Trump. What do social scientists say about all of this? As moralists, they talk a lot as individuals. as social scientists, they say almost nothing, very little. That is, I'm nudging people. Yes, you have there's people who are talking about the new social movements of the 70s, but to put this together and make sense of this goes beyond race. That is, many of the students in the ideologically driven will say, I want to study race, I want to study class, I want to study professional activity, like workers, gender, nationality of origin. These are used again and again and again, but that say, oh yeah, this is racism. That doesn't tell you what or how specifically works. Yaster brings things in. He doesn't call it racism. I can elaborate and will later. The mass media mobilize these with specific events, but look more closely at the social science journals for the precise power of these factors, race, class. What percent of the variation within a country is explained by these factors? This is in the because you don't get these pretty colors on the cover on canvas. In this chapter, we were surprised. We had measures of the people who, how often in the last year did you ride a bicycle, went bowling, went camping, gambled in a casino, attended church, went to a classical concert, went clothes shopping. And then across the top, what are the causes of these cultural lifestyle activities? Income, education, age, occupation, and being African American or not. How much do these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 social background characteristics explain these came from the Putnam's list of jogging, etc. How well do these things explain lifestyle and cultural activities? 100%? 50%? What would you guess?
Me?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know, definitely not 100%, but
Okay. Lady with a red shirt, crimson.
Yeah, I just do the same.
100%. What would you? No, someone else who hadn't talked already. Someone else give us. So anybody else choose a different number and why? Okay, if you watch the media, if you read Pierre Bourdieu, heard of him? Distinction. What does distinction tell you in the title, or what he would say? Distinction means the people at the top versus the people on the bottom, and they can be in terms of race, in terms of income, in terms of occupation, but the high people get more, and the people at the bottom get less. I mean, that's Bourdieu's theory. Okay, these data say you're not. Two of you said 100%. Others have said you haven't spoken yet. The answers are generally about 15%. That is, most of these classic determinants, causes, explain about 15%. And this is not just the U.S. This also holds in other fields. It happens in biology. Ask your GP or your surgeon, what proportion of your surgery really cures your patients? It's all of them. All my patients, I have nobody who ever fails. Look at the data published in medical journals. Look in biology journals. Look in economics journals. Look in political science journals. It's about 15%. We need to be more modest. It's not wrong, it's just the state of the world. Life is complicated. Because Einstein said, God really makes things more complicated, but there's also luck, there's chance, there's good mood, there are all kinds of things which haven't yet been captured or measured, including the table. So we talk about the scenes are like the table of elements of social analysis. The It's a good table of contents. It's like a cyclotron. We've now got data which are like a cyclotron. But with a cyclotron, the table of elements, it gets better, but it still explains about 15%. Atoms, molecules, these things keep getting invented and discovered in new ways. DNA, all the battle in the whole 20th century between race versus, is it racism which is in people's heads, or is it the environment which forces you to act this way? Is it heredity or the environment? And the answer was, it's both. DNA shows you that. Don't fight about that. It's a scientific transformation. It's a paradigm, deep transformation of the whole perspective of that debate. And as we learn more, that will, and then where and why is a good part of that answer. If you live in Bronzeville, you live in Hyde Park, you see things differently. Okay. So the Bourdieu, Jean-Claude Pesseron, Paul DiMaggio, Sharon Zuckin, these people say and write as if it's 100%. You believed it, you're wrong. Okay. Read the footnotes for people who calculate the percentages. We're not seeking to replace classic concepts like race, class, gender, or other things. We're adding the context which makes them more important or less important, and why and how are they important. That's what the answer is doing. This is what people are doing in novels, in poems, in making jokes. Look at humor. What makes people laugh at it or cry? Okay. Since the uprisings of 1968 and the fall of the Berlin Wall and Tiananmen protests in 1989, the world has deeply changed. But we still have Adam Smith, Karl Marx, Max Weber, and Emil Durkheim. How can we update these theories? Here's a big factor. Half the manual labor force in the advanced economies, Western Europe, the U.S., half the manual labor force has disappeared since the 1950s. Have you read about this in the New York Times or in leftist analyses, or even Adam Smith analyses? You don't. Or very few. What are the implications of if the proletariat has dropped by half? It hasn't gotten bigger and bigger, and it hasn't had a revolution in 68 or 89 the way the earlier Marx might have said. What do you do about the theory? So the Germans in 1890, 1900, they could see this, and one of their big theoretical questions among Marxist journals was, why is there no socialism in America? It should be there. They've got the most capitalism of any country in the world. It has the least socialism. What's going on? That's the kind of thing that we want to address here and related courses. We need to catch up with the journalists, some of the public, and political leaders. Some of the mayors are doing this. Not that necessarily they figured it out in advance, but they're trying things out faster because they've only got 4 years of their booted out. Tenure. Okay, people don't change so fast. The Chinese designers, Korean and Japanese cultural policies are transforming Asian export production and central planning as they built after World War II. I mean, Korea in 1945 was a less developed country. It was like Africa almost. Korea from 1945 to present, Korea has faster internet than the U.S. They've got more sophisticated cafes. They've got all kinds of things in Seoul that are not found in much of the world. The mass rural-urban migration is not motivated just by employment. It's by transformation, including nightlife. Beijing has a whole program of pursuing nightlife. And not only do they have, telling that one shop alone can keep open later, that's trivial, anybody can do that. They reroute the bus lines. They change that. They have the buses are running past midnight. They're telling the shopkeepers, you have to keep all your lights on and stay open. Hire no more staff to go until midnight or 2 a.m. on certain days. Okay, Chicago can't do that. Beijing does. And so in this way, some cities around the world, and this is why China is a particularly dramatic and interesting place to compare, because we can see things where the government can do it, and so one place in the U.S., which we only close halfway, or some of those are really too. Don't close it all the way. Halfway down is good. Yeah. Any others that you want? That's great. Which city in the U.S. is the most active in changing itself? Chicago. The mayors, Mayor Daley 1, but especially Mayor Daley 2, really transformed this city. And if you look at the budget of where the city was spent, it doesn't look like ours. It's called Mayor's Policies and Special Programs. So it took us a year to figure out where the money was coming from and going to. But we did it, and there's a huge increase of funding for the arts in the city of Chicago, and so they're subsidizing bands that come and perform here for 4 months in the summer, and it's a major driver of bringing young, talented people like you, graduate from you and other people regionally, but also the artists. There are 3 major art schools: the Art Institute, Columbia, and the but these are the two biggest ones, Columbia and the Art Institute School. There are lots of artists who are trained here to get BAs, and many more stay on here than do who get trained in other places like Brown, where they go to New York or LA. So the transformation of the components of who's staying on, who are the leaders, who are the creators, who are opening shops. In Southern Europe, where Roman law and the Catholic hierarchy were the source of many theorized past models, Frankfurt was seen as new. And one day in Frankfurt, Adorno told the class, "You felt Hitler's boot, but Horkheimer and I went to the United States where it was even worse. People there did not realize they were forced to smoke cigarettes, to see Hollywood movies, to ride in big cars and lead a lifestyle imposed by advertising." Their famous, end of quote. Their famous Hollywood article uses these same themes, and remember that the second face of Adorno was a subtle critic and nuanced atonal composer himself. He wrote music. And I propose we pass over the first Adorno and extend the second. I studied in Frankfurt with Adorno and Horkheimer and Habermas, and they're very smart people, but they also wrote some garbage. They did introduce aesthetic and emotional power of the arts into our central thinking to better interpret how cities and people do today. Why did Adorno stress advertising? I'll ask you. Tell us. Theoretically. This is not a percentage explained it. This is a big theory question. How many of you? Well, how many of you are taking a couple of economics courses? Nobody? Okay. You're slow to raise your hand. Keep working on some of these things. Okay. What's the role of advertising for economic analysis? That is, most economists classically include this, let's say most market economists will say we take preferences, but we don't tell you where and why preferences come from. We don't say that you like things that are black or women or something else like that. That is, they assume that the term consumer sovereignty, citizens do whatever they want. This is the opposite of what Adorno would say. Advertising destroys citizen autonomy and individualism, but how can we put these together? Okay, this was a hard question through the 20th century, mid-20th century. Walter Benjamin was a very smart, some people said this, the most creative writer in Weimar Germany. And he developed the term flaneur, F-L-A-N-E-U-R. What's a flaneur? About that from any of your courses or reading? Nobody? Okay. A flaneur, you sometimes called a shopper. And so there are pictures in the 19th century of a guy in Paris with a black top hat, and on his arm is a very elegant ballerina. And they are walking slowly in the boulevard, looking at what's in the shop windows. This is talking flaneur. There are many impressionist paintings like this. Okay. Today, we don't have the same lifestyle of people wearing wearing hats and looking in the shop windows. But Benjamin's Paris is an answer. Add shopping, entertainment, consumption, lifestyles, and the poetry of Baudelaire, who distilled the elements of street life, the recognition of Benjamin, who was then considered the leading intellectual of Weimar, and Baudelaire, the most respected cultural model of late 19th century France, suggests that smart citizens surpassed the simple deterministic social theories, then stressing race, class, and materialism. Likewise, Baudelaire himself edited the Journal of Wagner Studies. Wagner wrote 5 volumes of prose before composing his most important music. What's it called? The Ring. How many of you have heard of or watched The Ring? One? Okay. I'm going to say a word about how do we know that?
I don't know. Just kind of showed up. I was doing some stuff with like piano music.
Okay. All right. Look at a little bit in chapter 2 of Scenescapes and look a little bit more on your own. Well, we'll have more in the course. Wagner destroyed the classical tradition of music from Bach to Mozart and Beethoven. He destroyed them. His concept of the total artwork, the Gesamtkunstwerk, integrated large, huge numbers of little themes. And so you have different themes like this together, are variations of one another. So one goes higher theme, higher notes in the scale, others boom, boom, and they link with tough, macho, boom, boom, boom. Whereas the soprano, so those kinds of sounds he would put together with characters, with personalities, with actions when someone's about to be killed, or etc. That is, the driver was not, as in Mozart or Haydn or Beethoven, that we'll have a fast movement and a slow movement and a fast movement and so forth. Instead, there's none of that. The music changes as a function of, one of you said you're interested in the function of a cafe. The function driving Wagner is subjective emotion. What in people's feelings. He's writing this in 1840. This was the beginnings of what was called German Romanticism. Okay, So he put this together. 50 years later, Weber and Durkheim said stuff like this. 100 years later, it was Claude Lévi-Strauss who explicitly codified cultural content, including myths, in his 4-volume work called Mythology. Production, social relations focused on producing goods and services remains today the foundation of most social science, especially those of Marx, but not only. We are not only proposing to abandon these, but rather to enrich them, to contextualize and reframe them. For us, the scenes include fields, worlds, and network elements, but the most decisive is to add more explicitly aesthetics, taste. The feelings of taste connected to these as aesthetics is what Wagner is doing. But William Julius Wilson, the distinguished African-American sociologist who later revised his position, and it is slowly changing others. That is, Bill Wilson and Orlando Patterson, both of them, the lead sociologists, late 20th century, was race doesn't matter, class is the driver. We should really look at that. They reversed on that. Cities are, and that is, Theaster has shown the way. It can be the way people, that is, Theaster didn't just work with his hands, he lived there himself. He got to know the kids on the block. He used to have, instead of selling the house for $40,000, he kept it and said, people can come in and we're going to have black movies right here. And it's a beautiful house to sit there, welcome, and let's talk about it afterward. No money charged for anybody to come, etc. After 1968, Bill Wilson said, no longer we should ignore culture and call this blaming the victim, but he said, let's study how culture works. And so Bill Wilson again joined moved toward a perspective which we can see here.
I think that's probably a good place to
Yeah,
leave it.
let me stop there. That's good. Let's take a break. We're a little 10 minutes or so, but